I woke up to the sounds of the nearby mortar range. The gentle boom off in the distance told me it was 0500 because that's when the guns were allowed to go hot for the morning. The inside of my tent, however, was cold and wet. Fantastic. A puddle was forming by my feet, causing my heavy socks to soak and my feet to begin to itch. Next to my feet were my clothes for the day. Those would have to hang. Luckily, I had a waterproof backpack that I used for a pillow. Two sets of dry socks, underpants, and t shirts, along with other emergency supplies. Old deployment habits. My back was sore, along with my knees, from 2 weeks of sleeping outside. I did always prefer a warm hotel bed and free coffee over finding myself in the great outdoors. But sadly, I was a fan of eating consistently, and the Army kept letting me re enlist for some reason. So, camping. A louder boom roared in the distance, much less gentle than earlier. They must be having fun. I pulled my phone out and checked the messages. The first was from my father. I only read the preview of the text. Winston, can you believe? Ugh. He was probably just watching too much news again. Not a lot of point in reading the rest of that. Delete. The second text, however, was from this woman that I had been dating. I opened it.
I hope you slept well. If not, I can give you a massage when you get home. As long as you shower first.
I smiled, feeling all the warm promise of that text message as I looked at the puddle in my tent and then back at my phone. 0530. Sick call was at 06. I didn't have time to get the water out of my tent, get coffee, and then be 15 minutes early for sick call. So I donned my body armor that we just had to wear for some reason, threw on my backpack, and started walking toward the aid station. The aid station itself was a relic from the Vietnam War. A large tent held up by ancient aluminum poles, it had survived generations of National Guard soldiers and would remain in service until the very sun itself burned out. Just outside the tent sat two soldiers on a log in the smoke pit. I scanned them both. One was sitting upright and smoking a cigarette. The other was hunched over, moaning. Probably a fun stomach ache. But if he could moan like that, then his airway was open, and he lived for at least the next 5 minutes for me to go get coffee. As I walked into the aid station, I felt the vibrations of the mortar range. That was weird. We shouldn't be close enough to the impact zone to feel that. To my left, I saw the wooden field desk where the sick call paperwork was kept. I opened the bottom drawer and saw a locked fireproof box that contained two 30-round magazines to defend the aid station. While we were most likely safe deep in the heart of Indiana, the Army learned from the global war on terror to have a backup plan, just in case. I took the keys to the firebox out of my right pocket and opened it. Awesome. Two magazines. Keeping Indiana safe for democracy, one magazine at a time. I lifted each of them. Both magazines were full, 30 rounds each. Returning both magazines and locking the firebox, I walked over to the coffee pot and stood behind my junior medic, Tommy Sampson. Oh shit! You snuck up on me, Sergeant Carmichael. Sampson barely kept his coffee from spilling onto his body armor. I laughed and said, Hey, sorry about that. So which ambulance call sign is ours again? Sampson nodded and said, Bandage 87. That's the same as our bumper number, right? I asked, running him through our daily drills. Yes, Sergeant. I performed maintenance checks and services this morning. Radio is working, oil is good, a full tank of diesel. Ambulance is restocked. There are 2 full aid bags, and I picked up a case of MREs, he told me, checking things off mentally with his eyes. I smiled, proud of how much he'd grown in only a few short months. Hey, did you finish making those IV kits last night? I asked Samson. Samson took a deep breath and sighed, with tense shoulders and eyes that looked up at me with nervous regret. I I forgot to add the needles to the kits. There's 20 kits with no needles. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I'm so stupid. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Hey, no big deal. We'll just add needles to the kits. You did most of the work already. That'll just be our thing to do after lunch." He nodded, dropping his shoulders. Samson wanted so badly to succeed and would storm the gates of hell if that meant he could contribute to the team. With that much burning desire, training him was easy. I smiled and told him, "I think you're doing great. Who do we got today?" He took a deep breath and stood a little taller. "So we have a patient that came here early before sick call. He said, and I quote, 'I've been attempting to communicate with the Holy Spirit, but the Father won't talk to me.' What does that mean, Sergeant?" I smiled and said, "I think that's Southern Baptist for 'I'm constipated but don't know why.'" Samson handed me the clipboard and said, "He's by the smoke pit if you want to say hi." I dropped my backpack next to the tent opening by the smoke pit. I put on a surgical mask, latex gloves, and a hard plastic face shield. Old pandemic habits. Samson walked up behind me and did the same. I just hoped he didn't try to drink coffee while wearing it. Wouldn't be the first time. We walked out of the tent and saw 2 soldiers sitting on a log. Ramirez was smoking a cigarette and holding his rifle in his hands, with a second rifle in his lap. The other soldier, Parker, was hunched over, face in his sweaty, unpleasantly pale hands. I leaned into a crouch, thankful that my knees made the journey in one piece, and asked, "Hey, bud, what's going on?" A gentle sobbing was his response. I placed a gentle hand on the patient's shoulder, asking, "Can I look at your eyes real quick? When's the last time you had a bowel movement?" Without me having to tell him to, Samson took out a pad and prepared to copy. I smiled. Kid is picking up fast, I thought, turning back to Parker. He took his hands away from his eyes, showing enlarged pupils that filled them both. I could feel his moist and clammy skin through my latex glove.
I I can't hear him. Oh. Why? Did I do something? I'm so sorry, Father. Forgive me, please.
I nodded. Altered mental status. Examining his head, I began to dictate to Samson. Skin is cool and clammy to the touch. Bilateral enlarged pupils. Possible altered mental status. Suspect concussion. Deep bruising behind both eyes. Suggest patient be sent up to the local civilian hospital for CT scan and MRI. I looked at Ramirez and said, "Thank you for grabbing his weapon. He's not in a mental state to carry one." Ramirez nodded, a left eyebrow raised as the cigarette glowed.
Is he gonna be okay, Doc?
I turned to Parker. His pupils had not changed, but he seemed focused on me. A smile covered his entire face.
Don't worry. I've found it.
"Found what?" I asked, hoping he didn't have a secret knife on him.
the piece of the true understanding.
And then I heard a crack as his entire body contorted to the left, falling to the ground. He was on his hands and knees, his back crackling painfully to the left and to the right, screaming.
Thank you, Father.
That scream turned into a gurgle, gurgles that turned into retching, then vomiting blood. I had no fucking clue what I was looking at, but I knew just how transmittable pathogens were through blood. And this felt more like a bioweapon than a stomachache. Samson, eager to help, began towards him. I grabbed him by the back of the uniform before he got too close and yelled, "Stop!" Samson turned to me, confused. "We're not helping him?" "This is above our pay grade," I told him as I heard a strange noise. Ramirez stood up and began to scream.
It went down my throat.
His eyes stayed locked with mine, his eyes asking me why. I didn't have an answer. Those screams turned into gurgles as he fell to the ground, crawling into the woodline. Parker stopped vomiting blood and instead produced 3 eggs. I watched in horror as each egg traveled up his throat, engorging the center of his neck along the way. That's when I heard the whip snap repeat throughout the camp. Then the screams. Voices begging for help, followed by gurgling and vomiting. I didn't have time to figure this out. I walked up to the 3 eggs and stomped on them, the acid from the inside causing my boot to sizzle. Parker let out an inhuman screech and gurgled as acid burned through his throat. He laid there, writhing in agony. I grabbed my backpack and both rifles, handing one to Samson. "Do not, for any reason, take off your mask or your face shield. Find your Kevlar helmet now. We're taking 8-7 and we're getting out of here." I saw the panic start to set in his eyes. I got in his face and yelled, "Kevlar, now!" I ran toward the field desk, opening the first drawer. Digging through unopened cans of chewing tobacco, I saw my 6-inch folded knife. I threw that in my pocket and found the firebox keys, grabbing both magazines and tossing one to Samson, telling him, "Do not forget your weapon. Your Kevlar is next to mine by your left boot. Secure them. Let's go." Running out of the back of the tent, I felt the world shake as my ears started to ring. My left boot slipped with a shock, but my right managed to stay on solid ground. The mortar range was close, but the impact zone was supposed to be miles away. Not anymore. The mortar rounds were firing faster and faster, causing me to grab 2 earplugs from my left pouch and put them in. Samson ran up to ambulance 8-7 and opened the door. Ramirez, with blood all over the front of his uniform, leaped onto him. Screaming, Samson tried to push him off, but couldn't. As Ramirez held Samson's arms down, I saw the 3 eggs work their way up his throat. I took aim and shot Ramirez in the head twice, and then 3 rounds in the chest. 25 bullets left. But that didn't stop the eggs. I ran over to Samson and unfolded the knife, stabbing the dead soldier in the throat, aiming for the eggs. Acid poured out of the wound, spilling onto Samson's uniform. But it didn't burn through. I kicked the motionless Ramirez off Samson. "Let's clear the patient compartment and get the fuck out of here," I told him, pulling him up. The world shook again, knocking me to the ground. Samson reached down and pulled me up with his right hand, his rifle secured in his left. We got into the patient compartment, and he opened the door. No one. Ambulance secure. I got into the driver's seat, and he sat to my right, a radio between us. The screams of the dying threw static, and the seat underneath me was soaking wet. Fantastic. I started the vehicle and hit the gas. We were little more than a half-mile away when the world shook our ambulance nearly off the road. I felt my stomach lurch into my throat. For a moment, I was 22 again, dodging IEDs on deployment. We were nearly about to go off the road and into the woodline when I forced the steering wheel all the way to the left, getting us back on course. Samson looked out the window. I saw smoke in my driver's side mirror. He turned to me and said, I think that was the aid station. Do we go back? He asked me, clicking his Kevlar into place. Tommy was rocking back and forth, holding his rifle like a child holding a teddy bear. I didn't blame him. I shook my head and just kept driving.